Now, from Radio Today Entertainment.
This is KAOS.
What Radio Chaos is about is this. It poses the question, will the technology of communication help us to understand one another better or keep us apart?
Press the button. You mean the button?
Timothy White's Rockstars presents Roger Waters.
Songwriting has become increasingly a passive occupation for me, at least in the initial stages, in that I wait until there's a specific feeling which I recognize now, where I feel very blank and cut off, and I know that means that somewhere inside me there are some feelings which, given the chance, will come out as a song. All was just a break in the wall. There is something very seductive about the modern sounds that these modern machines make. But in the end, what you come back to is the blues. I was always fascinated by the very simple fact that, if there's an echo delay that's going gong, 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 you can go gong, and make rhythms with all the work being done for you by a simple delay device.
From Pink Floyd to Radio Chaos, it's Roger Waters on Timothy White's Rockstars.
These are radio waves in your head.
Radio, for me anyway, is the most involving of the forms of communication. Far more involving than TV.
Is there a request?
Radio Waves, the lead-off track from Roger Waters' solo album, Radio Chaos. Hi, I'm Tony Pigg. Welcome to Timothy White's Rockstars. Of all the great bands in rock history, few have been more mysterious and provocative than Pink Floyd. The chief architect of the Floyd sound has always been their leader, Roger Waters. Now Roger once again steps into the spotlight alone with his second solo album, Radio Chaos. This controversial new record is rock studio craft, every bit as unique and provocative as the very best of Pink Floyd. The plot of Radio Chaos revolves around a ham radio operator named Benny and his handicapped son, Billy, who can receive and transmit radio waves without a tuner. In a masterful musical act of espionage, Billy creates the illusion of a nuclear holocaust and teaches the world a lesson it will never forget. On this edition of Rockstars, Timothy White catches up with Roger Waters at his headquarters in London. In an exclusive interview, Roger talks about his tempestuous career, from the formation of Pink Floyd in the 60s to his role as the leader of rock's most progressive and innovative band. Plus, Waters reveals why he's waging a legal battle to retire the Pink Floyd name forever. And two Rockstars exclusives. For the first time anywhere, Roger Waters presents the demo version of the unreleased song that inspired the Radio Chaos project in the first place. Also, we'll hear a live version of a Pink Floyd classic performed by Roger's new Bleeding Heart Band and recorded exclusively for Timothy White's Rockstars. Now, here's the author of the book Rockstars and the former senior editor of Rolling Stone magazine, Timothy White.
First of all, I'd like to welcome Roger Waters to Rockstars.
Thank you.
Many people complain about the hostile artistic environment in which they must function these days. Roger Waters is someone who's done something about it with Radio Chaos. There's so many things to talk about on the record. Maybe it'd be fun to go back to when radio became important to you.
When I was a kid, you could listen to the new kind of American music that we were beginning to get in the early 50s and mid-50s in two ways. One via Radio Luxembourg, and two, if the weather conditions were right, you could pick up American Forces Network from Hilversum in Holland as well.
What was being played on the one station and the other? Was there a contrast?
Yeah, well, I seem to remember that there were a number of jazz programs weekly on American Forces Network, which you didn't. Radio Luxembourg was only rock and roll or pop music. It was the beginnings of rock and roll in those days, so you were just beginning to get the first records coming across. I think almost before they ever got played on the radio here. And of course, English radio at the time, well, there wasn't any. Well, there was BBC radio, and some of it was great. That was the other thing in my youth, was listening to Saturday Night Theatre on the BBC Home Service, which was every Saturday night. They had a play of some kind. We all used to sit around together and listen to it.
Let's talk about Radio Waves, the song itself, and that fashion in which Billy is introduced. Why is radio so important to Billy?
Well, Billy, until he gets hold of the cordless phone, his communication is a one-way thing. He can't tell anybody anything or speak to anybody, but he receives all the radio waves that are flying about naturally. And so here he is, apparently a vegetable, and he's learning stuff all the time and getting more and more information and sifting it. But his view of the world is a strange one in that it's only based upon radio communication.
Did you see his personality in musical terms straight away?
It wasn't like I had an idea about, oh, I know, I'll write a piece about this spastic Welsh kid who gets moved halfway across the globe by the market forces. I decided the time had come to start writing some new material. And the first two songs that I wrote, the first one was a song called Get Back to Radio. And it just popped out and it went, I'll tell you the lyrics, it went like an ember glowing in the dark. I had almost grown cold, frozen like a soldier standing by the flagpole, like a player they all said was too old. I had been tempted to hand in my key, was the first verse. But I am not alone, I feel you're with me, I will not be a packet of crap on MTV. I am a man, I will not be a number, get back to radio. Like an ember, glow in the dark. I have almost grown cold. It's not on the record, although it's central to the thing. That was the first thing that I wrote. So I went, yeah, well, that's interesting, and put it to one side, and then waited for the next moment. So then I had to apply a more conscious attitude towards what was starting to come out and think, well, then it all kind of developed out of that.
What was your growing up?
This is Rock Stars. Roger Waters in conversation with Timothy White.
I don't create any world. What happens is that there are all these feelings out there, some of which we own individually and some of which we share in a group unconscious. So it seems to me that writing songs or painting pictures or whatever, anything creative like that you do is either reaching into your individual little pond of unconscious feeling or maybe even dipping into the group pond. And maybe if I write a song that, or anybody else does, when that song that you hear, it's likely that the reason that you get the shiver down the spine or that you respond to it when you're a kid under the covers with your headphones on, or whenever, whoever, wherever you are, whatever the music is, whether it's classical music or jazz or pop music or whatever, it's because there is something in it that touches this pool that we all have access to in different ways.
Rock concerts as played by Pink Floyd in the early days were real breakthrough kinds of things that expanded people's notion of a rock concert, even in the simple duration of it. There were points back there where Pink Floyd was doing like 5-hour shows or something with a 20-minute intermission.
We were the Grateful Dead of Northern Europe. Certainly we got away from the idea of, you know, the 3-minute pop single and a show being like a collection of 4 or 5 of those, and you got the 4 or 5 hits and that was it, you know, in the package tour way. So it moved pop music closer to one of its antecedents, that being jazz, you know, where you just stand there and play until you get too drunk or too tired or too old, you know. And so that was good.
You must have encountered some resistance, not just to say a 5-hour show, but I mean to these long shows, you know, to these shows that kind of succeeded on their own terms.
Well, I remember the business not being thrilled by this. I remember a guy who's still working actually in this country called Pete Murray. He was a DJ then and still is now. There was a program called Jukebox Jury, and he'd heard about all this nonsense that was going on, and he didn't like it at all. And he actually said, without knowing anything about it really, just by virtue of the word of mouth, that he said, this is a con, and the British public are too clever to swallow this rubbish, and it won't last 6 months. This was in 1967. 68, and I've never forgotten that.
Another Brick in the Wall, Part 2 from The Wall, Roger Waters' quintessential view of paranoia. And we started with Shine On, You Crazy Diamond, Part 5, a tribute to his first partner in Pink Floyd, Syd Barrett. Still to come, the secret behind the success of the album that's been on the Billboard chart longer than any record in history, Dark Side of the Moon, when the Roger Waters edition of Rock Stars continues. Welcome back to Timothy White's Rock Stars with Roger Waters.
You look at a phenomenon like the Dark Side of the Moon, the album, which I think has been on the charts for some 600-odd weeks. Chances are there's some test marketing group right now sitting there and saying, well, you know, what they did here, that, you know, to get this kind of impact, they wada and they, you know, tinkered this and tooled with that.
If people are thinking like that, they're simply not recognizing the fact that the quality of the Dark Side of the Moon has sod all to do with its popularity. If it's about anything, it's about that one person putting that record on, or maybe 2 people. You know, it's about listening to the music.
Yes, absolutely. I certainly was in the right.
People feel they can understand, especially business people feel they can understand the marketplace very quickly. It would make them certainly richer to be able to predict people's curiosity, to be able to predict people's tastes.
Yeah, I'm not really concerned with that. You know, I think the more and more the music industry has been taken over by large companies, they are clearly not interested in music and never will be. They're interested in profit. And that's just something that I have to live with and the other artists have to live with.
Looking back over Pink Floyd's long career, if I'm not mistaken, I think that you were the person who really instigated the concept album. Maybe you feel comfortable with that term, maybe not. I always felt that these were records that told a story.
Concept is fine by me. At least everybody knows what you're talking about.
Right.
And Dark Side of the Moon was the first one that was like this, where there's a little overture where you get a taste of lots of the songs that are about to come, and then the thing follows some kind of sequence that you can understand. There's a hypothesis at the beginning, you know, breathe in the air, don't be afraid to get, and all of that. Very, very simple stuff, but nevertheless straightforward, and then an examination of the things that might come between an individual and the possibilities of that basic postulation at the beginning of the record, and at the end of the record, a conclusion of some kind.
The lunatic is on the grass. The lunatic is on the grass.
I worked on that record a lot and trying to sort out how to make it work, and at the end of it I was satisfied, so I thought, well, I'll do that again, and I've just gone on making those kinds of records.
This is Timothy White's Rock Stars with Roger Waters. Still to come, Roger tells why he wants to retire the name Pink Floyd when Timothy White's Rock Stars returns. Now, more of Timothy White's Rock Stars with Roger Waters.
When you performed Dark Side of the Moon at one point, didn't you have a live airplane that crashed onto the stage?
Well, it was a sort of a model aeroplane on a wire that came from the back of the auditorium.
Well, was it a good-sized one, or?
It was about 15, 16 feet.
What other kinds of things did you have for the live performance?
Well, Dark Side of the Moon had very little. It had the circular screen, which I've used many times since, and I'm going to be using this time as well, because for a form in arenas, I think it's a very satisfying shape for a screen, and it can kind of hang there in the air, and it's easy to deal with. You know, the key things in theatrical shows are things that an audience can respond to very, very quickly and easily, and they know exactly what it is the minute. So if you put a flashing red light, a revolving red light, you know, immediately everybody goes ambulance or problem or design, and if you put a blue light, they go police. So you can use that kind of theatrical shorthand very easily. Nothing clever. And the quad sound, which is, you know, makes the whole thing more involving.
Do you get a kick out of the fact that the Wall Tour is now part of rock and roll legend?
Yeah, I do get a kick out of that.
You said proudly.
I do, yeah. You know, and it was luckily the guy who was, well, he's still managing the other guys, a guy called Steve O'Rourke, who did the budget for the tour. He thought it would cost $1 million, and actually it cost $2 million. So if we'd known that when we set out, we wouldn't have done it. But at the end of the day, we were about $600,000 down.
Oh.
So it cost me and Dave and Nick $200,000 each to do it. And I don't regret a single dollar of it. It was bloody good fun.
Hey you, out there in the cold, getting lonely, getting old, can you feel me? Together we stand, divided with more.
There's a disagreement now. You know, Pink Floyd, it's led by David Gilmour, is on the road, and obviously you'll be on the road as well, and you can test their right to do that.
My view is that it would be proper for the name to be quietly retired. My view is that Pink Floyd, whatever it was, is no more. Whatever it was. Well, it was a group of people working together, and it no longer exists, and therefore but clearly, if that's my view, and clearly David Gilmour and Nick Mason, I guess, they have a separate and different view.
Do you think there'll be some easy resolution of this disagreement, or?
I don't know. We are actually beginning to talk about it a bit now, so hopefully there will, because, if there isn't, it means that an awful lot of cash will get into lawyers' pockets, which would be a drag. I can't really relinquish the title with the thought that possibly in a number of years' time there might be some entity calling itself Pink Floyd. There's people who I've never even met. My ties with the idea that was Pink Floyd, if you like, are too strong for me to roll over for that.
Roger Waters on Rock Stars. We heard Hey You from The Wall, and we started with Speak to Me and Breathe in the Air from the Pink Floyd album Dark Side of the Moon. Next, a Rock Stars exclusive. Roger Waters and his new band, the Bleeding Heart Band, recorded live when Timothy White's Rock Stars returns. And now, a Rock Stars exclusive. For the first time anywhere, here's Roger Waters along with the Bleeding Heart Band performing a song from the Pink Floyd album Adam Heart Mother, If.
If I were a swan, I'd be gone. If I were a train, I'd be late. If I were a good man, I would talk with you more often than I do. If I were asleep, I could dream. If I were afraid, I could hide. If I go insane, please don't put your words in my brain. If I were the moon, I'd be cool. If I were a rule, I would bend. If I were a good man, I would understand the spaces between friends. If I were alone, I would cry. If I were with you, I'd be home and dry. If I go insane and they lock me away, please, baby, will you still let me join in the game?
chaos, it has a happy ending.
Well, you see,
the tide is turning. I mean, it's a lovely ballad, and there's hope in it.
Yeah. Well, my thesis is, you see, that what Radio Chaos is about is, on another level, is this. It poses the question, will the technology of communication help us to understand one another better or keep us apart? And it seemed to me that Live Aid, which predates The Tide is Turning by 24 hours, because I wrote the song the next day, more or less, was symbolic of the possibility for us, those of us who care, or rock and roll, or whatever you want, it doesn't matter who you are or what you do, to embrace the technology in order to make it more likely that human beings will communicate with each other and cooperate in order to create a world that's better for all of us to live in, rather than the technology being used in the way that we see it being used by Colonel Oliver North at the moment. As the technology of communication devolves more and more to the individual, and we individually gain more and more access to it, it becomes a less and less efficient tool in the hands of the powers that be, and more likely that the edge of the sword that belongs to us, the individual human being, will sharpen.
That's a great scenario. I'd love to see that come to be.
Just touch wood and hope. Or push a bit, you know, if you get a chance to push.
I used to think the world was flat. Really threw my head into the crowd. I felt I had used up my quota of yearning. Used to looking on the children at night in the glow of their Donald Duck light, and frighten myself with the thought of my little ones burning. But oh, the tide is turning. The tide is turning.
Well, I'd like to thank you for all the stimulating talk as well as the stimulating music.
Well, thank you for coming and talking to me.
Rockstars is produced by Dan Formento and Ben Manila for Radio Today. Executive producers Jeffrey Rich and Beverly Pedratzik. Production assistance from Mark Humble and Chip Humble. Special thanks to Peter Rudge and Nicole Packer from the Roger Waters Music Office, Jody Miller of JLM Publicity, and Columbia Records. Rockstars is based on the book Rockstars by Timothy White. I'm Tony Pigg. Timothy White's Rockstars is a presentation of Radio Today Entertainment.